You know that specific moment, standing in front of the same product you bought not very long ago? The one that failed earlier than it should have. The one that is now being replaced by an almost identical version at roughly the same price. And the specific thought that arrives before the purchase is made. I have bought this before. Not the exact item, the category, the cheap version of the thing, the one that looked sufficient, cost less than the alternative, and lasted exactly long enough to make the replacement feel like a separate decision rather than the predictable conclusion of the first one. And you think about the other version, the one that cost more, that you did not buy the first time, that is still on the shelf at what now seems, in retrospect, like a considerably more reasonable price than two of the cheaper one. The second purchase is always the more expensive lesson.
While somewhere else, someone is buying the cheap version for the first time,
with the same confidence you had the first time. Here is what almost nobody calculates at the point of purchase. The price is not the cost. When someone stands in front of two versions of the same thing, a pair of boots, a kitchen pan, a tool, a bag, a piece of furniture, and chooses the cheaper one, they are making a decision about the number on the tag. They are not making a decision about the number that will have been spent on that category in 5 years, or 10, or 20. That number is different, and it is almost always larger for the cheaper option than anyone calculated at the moment of choosing it. The cheap version fails and is replaced. The replacement fails and is replaced again. Each time feels like a fresh decision, a small amount, reasonable, easy to justify, and the total accumulates in a category nobody adds up because no single purchase was large enough to notice. The price of the better version sits in the memory as expensive. The price of the replacements spreads across years until your brain stops connecting them. Only a vague sense that a certain category always seems to need attention, always seems to cost something, always seems to produce the same moment of standing in front of the same product and wondering why it has to be replaced again. Nobody chooses the cheaper version because they want to buy the same thing multiple times. They choose it because the price is what is visible at the checkout, a single number, present and concrete, and the cost is what accumulates somewhere quietly in the background, distributed across several receipts, across several years. This pattern even has a name. Researchers call it present bias. Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, documenting how people overvalue the present relative to the future, showed that immediate costs feel more real than deferred ones, even when the deferred costs are larger. Applied to buying cheap, the higher price of the better version is paid today, in full, visibly. The cost of replacing the cheap version is paid later, in installments, spread across enough time that each payment feels small, and each decision feels fresh. Present bias ensures the immediate cost dominates the decision, even when the lifetime cost of the cheaper option is higher. Never buying cheap twice is the correction for a bias that makes the price tag feel like the cost, when the cost is the total of everything that tag will eventually become. The receipt tells you the price. Time tells you the cost. And present bias operates inside a culture that has its own name for the alternative. The principle of buying something once and keeping it for life has roots in the pre-industrial tradition of objects made to last. Tools handed down, boots resold, pans that outlived the people who bought them. That tradition became a community of more than 1 million people who exchanged knowledge about products worth buying once, rated by years before replacement, which is sometimes never. Never buying cheap twice is the recognition that affordable and cheap are not the same calculation. The cheaper option is frequently not the more affordable one once the replacements are counted. And the numbers confirm what the longer-lasting boot already knew. Quality work boots, $400, resold twice over 20 years, cost $20 a year. Cheap boots, $80, replaced every 2 years, cost $40 a year and $800 total. Over 20 years, the expensive boots end up costing half as much.
They just required a larger number on a single receipt. Cheap headphones at $30, replaced every 8 months, cost $45 a year, $270 over 6 years. One quality pair at $150, lasting the same 6 years, cost $25 a year. The receipt said more, the cost said less. 3 forces. A psychology that makes the price tag feel more real than the lifetime cost. A culture that replaced making things with buying and replacing things. And a number, only visible when all the receipts are added together, almost always larger for the cheaper option than anyone calculated the first time. It was there the boots, the first pair, the ones that seemed entirely adequate at the price, that lasted 14 months before the sole separated in the rain on the way to somewhere important. And the second pair, same brand, same price range, same reasoning applied to what was now presented as a fresh decision. That lasted 11 months before the seam gave way. It was there the calculation finally made. 2 pairs of boots in less than 3 years, $160 spent, the original problem unsolved, and a third purchase now necessary. And it was there the other boots, the ones that had been on the shelf both times, that had cost $240 the first time they were considered and set aside as too expensive, and the specific arithmetic of what they would have cost compared to what had already been spent and what would now need to be spent to finally have boots that did what boots were supposed to do. It was there the first pair of the more expensive boots and the specific quality of 3 years later, when they were still on the feet, still doing what they were bought to do, and the sole was showing none of the signs that the cheaper ones had shown by month 11. It was there the understanding, not a principle, not a rule, just the clear and slightly embarrassing recognition that the expensive boots had not been expensive at all, that expensive and cheap had been measuring the wrong number, and that the right number was the one that only became visible after the second receipt. These are not people who spend more money. Most of them own fewer things than people who buy cheap, because what they own does not need replacing. The house has less in it. The wardrobe has fewer items. The kitchen has fewer pans. But what is there works, has always worked, and will continue to work without requiring a decision about whether it needs replacing yet. What they do differently is ask a question before the purchase that most people only ask after the second one. What will this cost me over the time I actually need it? Not the price on the tag, the real cost, what the product actually extracts over its lifetime, including every time it needs replacing before the job is done. That is not someone with more money to spend. That is someone who understands that the price is what the store charges, and the cost is what accumulates across every replacement, every frustration, every moment of noticing that the thing is failing again before its job is done. They feel the pull of the lower price at the checkout. That pull is real. A smaller number on a single receipt always feels more reasonable than a larger number on a single one. But they have done the second calculation, the one that multiplies the smaller number by the replacements, and found that the larger number on the single receipt is frequently the smaller number when the replacements are counted. Now, finally, the objection. Not everything expensive is better. Plenty of cheap things work perfectly well, and plenty of expensive things are just expensive. You are paying for a brand, not for quality. And some people genuinely cannot afford the more expensive version. Telling them to buy quality is not useful advice when the budget does not allow it. This is not about always buying the most expensive version of everything. There are categories where the cheap version works perfectly well, and the expensive one adds nothing of substance.
Nothing here argues for paying more where the quality difference is not real. This is about the categories where the cheap version visibly fails before its job is done, and where the cost of replacement, repeated, exceeds the cost of the better version bought once. And the expensive things are just brands argument carries less weight than it assumes in those categories. The boots that last 20 years are not 20 times better than the boots that last 1. But they cost the same as 2 years of replacing the cheaper ones, and they require no further decisions, no further receipts, no further mornings of noticing that the sole is separating again. The people who never buy cheap twice are not spending more. They are simply deciding once instead of deciding repeatedly, which turns out, across a lifetime, to cost considerably less. Here's what most people get backwards. The person who always buys the cheaper version, who chooses the lower number on the tag, replaces it when it fails, chooses the lower number again, and repeats the cycle across every category for the rest of their life, is not saving money. They are paying the full cost of the more expensive version in installments they do not recognize as such, plus the additional cost of every decision, every replacement, every morning of noticing that the thing is failing again before it was supposed to, every moment of standing in front of the same product for the third time and choosing the same number that produced the same result the previous 2 times. The person who never buys cheap twice is not spending more. They are spending once on something that does not come back asking for more until the job is actually done, which, for the right product, may be longer than they will need it. Most people choose the cheaper version because the price is lower. These people choose the better version because the cost is lower. There is a moment people who never buy cheap twice all describe in almost the same way. It is not the first time they bought the expensive version. It is not the moment they justified the price. It is several years later, using the thing that was bought once and is still doing what it was bought to do, and noticing, briefly, that it has not asked for anything since the day it arrived. No replacement, no repair beyond the ordinary, no moment of noticing it failing before the job was finished. Just the thing, doing the thing, the way things do when they were made to last, rather than made to be replaced. One day, you stop remembering what you paid. You only remember that it never asked you to buy it again. And somewhere, a calculation. How many times the cheaper version would have been bought by now? How many receipts? How many decisions? How much more? The price was never the point. What never buying cheap twice said about the difference between what something costs at the checkout and what it costs to keep replacing it was. Do you never buy cheap twice? Or does the lower number on the tag still feel like the more affordable choice? Drop it below. We read every single one.